Could Diddy get bail? May sound like a long shot, but is there something that could maybe change the judge's mind? Well, we're going to be speaking with the bail bondsman to the stars, Ira Judelson, about whether Diddy may get out in a rumored new bail package. He has been working with Diddy's team. Plus, what can we expect about whether the rap mogul will spend the next decade or two behind bars?
After Diddy was found guilty, the courtroom was still a hive of activity. Reporters were rushing around. They were blowing up phones. In addition, his legal team was already acting desperately behind closed doors while the public was still processing the shock.
Post-verdict world is what's next, right? After being convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution and acquitted of racketeering conspiracy and 2 counts of sex trafficking, now we ask, what is his sentence going to be on those 2 charges, the Mann Act charges? And there's also another question that we're going to address today. Could he get bail? Could he get out? You might be saying, Jesse, wait a second. He was denied bail at every turn. And you would be right, he was. Despite proposing extensive bail conditions during the course of this legal saga, including a $50 million bail package and monitoring by private security personnel, the court was not convinced. Now, by law, the defense has the burden to prove that Combs is not a flight risk or danger to the community. And given the charges, the allegations, including that he was improperly trying to contact people in the case pre-trial, he was always denied release. But then there's what happened after the verdict last week. And this is an interesting conversation. And again, we're going to be speaking with Ira Judelson in a minute, who's been working with Diddy's team on possibly getting him released. But after the verdict, the defense applied for Combs to be released from detention pending sentencing. But that request was again denied by Judge Arun Subramanian. The defense argued, look, he's no longer charged with RICO, there's no longer presumption of detention, we have his passport, there's no access to private planes, there's no criminal history, this is his first conviction, he would be a fool to mess any of this up because he was just given his life back by the jury, he wasn't convicted of the highest charges, he was facing up to life in prison, now he's not. He should be allowed to return to his property, his mansion in Florida. There'll be a $1 million bond. Now, the government argued, look, Sean Combs, he was convicted of serious charges, Mann Act violations. There was physical abuse in this case. There was prolific use and distribution of drugs. He committed crimes while under investigation, including having drugs in his hotel room when he planned to surrender to federal authorities back in September of 2024. And Judge Arun Subramanian denied the bail application, sided with the government, that these convictions on these charges by law, they trigger the mandatory detention statute, that the defense conceded Combs is violent. They conceded that at trial, quote, we own the domestic violence. That's what the defense had said. The judge also made the point that it was impossible for the defense to demonstrate that he poses no danger, particularly given his violence after the searches of his properties and when he knew he was under investigation. That's the whole Violent Jane episode, attacking Jane, one of the victims in this case. And also that the evidence at trial showed there was a years-long pattern of abuse and violence. But despite the judge denying Combs' release once again, and given that his sentencing has officially been confirmed for October 3rd, that was agreed by both the defense and the prosecution yesterday, could he get out beforehand? It's an interesting question. Let me bring in right now a special guest. I am joined by one of the most renowned bail bondsmen, probably in the country, definitely in New York, Ira Judelson. Ira, thank you so much for coming here on Sidebar, and pleasure to meet you.
You too, Jess. Pleasure myself.
Let's talk a little bit about what you do. Talk about what you do. I don't know if everybody completely understands the process and your role in it.
You know, it's funny. Not a lot of people understand the world of bail. They think that a bondsman just raises his hand and you know, that's where it ends. With me, it starts with the people that you meet, the lawyers, the judges, the DAs, hearing about a bail, putting it together, which could take days, weeks, as in this case that we're talking about right now, Puffy. I started on this case going back almost 7 months ago when they brought me in as a...
One final shot, one last Mary. Hale, they sought bail before sentencing, not after. Why? Since they were aware of the impending event. It wasn't just going to be a terrible sentence. It would not be kind. They also desired time. It's time to make plans. It's time to go. It's time to postpone the inevitable. They did not expect a miracle. The clock was running out and the walls were closing in quickly, so they were pleading for a break. Diddy's expression changed when the jury foreman said the word guilty. Reality struck like a ton of bricks. What we had never seen on him before had taken the place of the sneer, the confidence, and the air of untouchability, utter terror. You can't fake that level of terror, the kind that only appears when you're sure you're really done. The people in the room spoke for themselves, even though the cameras didn't capture what went on behind the scenes. His attorneys were in a panic, with phone calls ringing, laptops open, pages rustling, and arguments being mumbled. Even before the sound of the gavel had subsided, they began filing emergency
It
motions.
was a very unique bail package. And you need to tell me if it was unique. $50 million, right?
Yes.
You know, the idea of private security. It was an
Yes.
interesting argument because who would monitor him. It was interesting because the prosecution at one point had said it's not fair, right? He's a wealthy celebrity who's providing a bail package that other people in a similar position wouldn't be able to provide. Now, the defense was like, well, the only reason we're presenting a package like this is because of what he's accused of and his wealth and his resources. We have to address that in a certain way. The reason it's so extensive is because of his wealth and resources. That bail package that was put forward was rejected by the court. What did you make of that?
Well, at that time, the judge was looking at the RICO Act and sex
Yeah.
trafficking. So, Puffy was looking at possibly 25 years, or more, depending on what the guidelines were based on if he was convicted. So at 55 years old, at that time, it's almost a life sentence. So, and he has a lot of wealth and he had a private plane. So the judge was looking at that. Plus, in the federal system, they look at danger to the community. Where in the state system, they're not allowed to look at that. They look at risk of flight. So I think with all the letters behind that were coming in that we were not really privy to from a lot of the alleged victims, I think the judge made a decision that, hey, this is not going to be sufficient enough. I thought that at the end, he kind of, when we brought in our private security team and we showed him who was going to be doing it, we did Sam Bankman-Fried. So we knew that, we would be completely covered on that end. And we gave him the idea of there would be no Wi-Fi in the building that we were looking at, and that he would not be able to really be able to connect with anybody but his legal team and his family. We thought at that point that maybe we had a chance, but at the end, the judge denied it, and that's where we stood. And now on this case coming forward, after the convictions, after he wasn't convicted, at the end, we didn't know what he was going to do. So, when Mark reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
And what is that bail package and by the way, is this a bail package that you think could be submitted again even after the judge just denied bail?
Well, the judge denied bail based on the statute, and the statute stated a certain amount of information that part of the Mann Act that, was not eligible for bail. There are certain circumstances that can be done. We're going to regroup again. I know that they were going to go talk to Mr. Combs again and see what happens there. They have the October 3rd date. And I don't know where he stood. As of the other day, he wanted to get out. I don't think anybody wants to be at NBC where he is. So we're going to reconvene and see what happens, at a later date. We could go back with another package.
Would it require him to stay in New York? Would it be him to be, I know he wanted to go back to his property in Miami, Florida. And there's also an interesting question, I think, that his defense put forward. He just got his life back. That's what they said. He wasn't convicted of the top charges. He was convicted of transportation to engage in prostitution, but he would be a fool to try to violate.
They knew Diddy couldn't afford even one, so they weren't wasting any time. They engaged in every possible argument, claimed to have strong ties to the neighborhood, claimed to be a humanitarian, a businessman, and a father, declared that he will not run, declared he would never run, that he was too well known to fade away. But the truth was known by all in that room. Diddy had the means to disappear from the world. The prosecution remained unfazed. They brought what they had learned to the table. The lead prosecutor got off to a cool but firm start, Your Honor, This individual does not behave in a typical manner. He owns private aircraft under fictitious LLCs. He possesses assets in countries without extradition agreements, under fictitious aliases. He has access to millions of dollars in liquid cash. He will go before the ink on the documents dries if we give him bail today. They weren't lying either. They displayed financial documents, jet logs, receipts, hidden properties, and correspondence amongst helpers organizing silent escapes. This was a playbook, not a
rather lenient sentence compared to what he was facing. So 2 questions there. Do you think that it would require him to be in New York as opposed to Florida? And do you think that he'd really be in a position to violate the conditions?
First question is, I can't determine what a judge is thinking. I don't think, and this is my opinion, that the judge would let him out of the jurisdiction. I don't know. We can do private security down in Miami. We could also do private security in California, as we did with Sam Bankman-Fried. I would probably think that if the judge would think about possibly a package, that he would want us to keep him here. When we first put the first package together, going a few months back, we did have an apartment here in the city that I did scout out and located a brownstone in New York that was sufficient enough, which we thought, which was 1 entrance in, 1 entrance out, for our security to be there, and no rooftop, couldn't get out from any of the windows. So we could always go back and see if that's still available. I don't know if it is or not. So I can't determine what a judge is going to think. I don't think he would let that happen if he decided to make bail, but you never know. This judge was very fair to both sides in the trial. And as far as would he want to screw up what he, after being, the convictions not coming through, I think you got to be dumb to do something like that.
Right.
He is going to possibly get his life back. I don't know what's going to happen in the music world. I don't know what's going to happen in his regular life, but he's not facing the time that he was facing before that.
And I'm going to talk about sentencing a little bit later on. The private security, right, that would monitor him 24/7. The argument could be, and this is something the prosecution's put forward, how can we trust that he's not just they're not bought and paid for, they're not really gonna watch him if he's hiring them, there's a conflict of interest there. What's your response to that?
My team is ex-law enforcement, all gentlemen that have been involved either in the Marshal Service, FBI, police, even some CIA. So again, my people would not risk their lives on something or risk their reputation or even possibly a criminal charge on something like this. So my guys are vetted. They've been doing this a very long time. So they wouldn't jeopardize anything like that. Now, when we first talked about private security, Puffy wanted some of his people. We denied that right away. It's our guys. It's my reputation on the line here. And that's when I went to court and Tony Rico and Mark Ignifilo both stood up and said, hey, Mr. Judelson is, his reputation's on the line here. He's been doing this a long time. I've bailed out Harvey Weinstein, Conor McGregor, Plaxico Burress, Cat Williams, Lawrence Taylor. So, I'm not going to put my reputation or my license in jeopardy, for X amount of money. To me, I'm going on. I might want to turn this business over to my son one day.
Yeah, the New York Times did a profile on you called "Bailing Out the Stars." How are celebrities different? How are they different from other criminal defendants?
More demanding. When you get the phone call from the lawyer or whoever, a publicist, anybody, it could happen in the middle of the night. A celebrity does not want to spend an extra minute incarcerated. Things change. So
they refer to him as a professional chameleon, a high-functioning manipulator, and someone who could enchant a crowd while conducting a clandestine operation behind closed doors. A man who wore power like armor and used his influence like a shield. And the courtroom sensed it at that very moment. The gravity, the weight. There was more than one man involved. Decades of harm, decades of silence, and decades of meticulously planned deceit were all involved. Diddy gripped the edges of his chair, as if the wood may save him. His attorneys made every effort. Emotional pleadings, historical donations, and character testimonies. They used all of the book's cliches. However, The judge was unimpressed by the attention and remained stoic, not touched by crocodile tears, not duped by showmanship. Then it arrived. Bail refuted. It's just 2 words. But now that it was actual, it seemed like a sentence. No more hiding behind mansions with gates. No more spin from the PR machine. No more attempting to change the story on Instagram stories. Diddy refused to return home. There was no way he was leaving that courthouse. He was headed directly for a cell. And the collapse happened right away. His group faltered. His face broke. For him, it was the end of the world, and he glanced about as if he had just been told so. The world, meanwhile, was watching outside court.
So, Elizabeth, let's talk about what happened next, because right after the verdict, it goes into the idea of, can he be released on bail? Okay, and the judge set a hearing for 5 p.m., so later on today, you literally, at the time of this recording, just got out of there. Remember, from a legal point of view, the burden is on the defense to show that Sean Combs is not a danger or won't flee. What was the judge's decision, and why did the judge decide that?
Well, given that the top of our show, Jesse, or the top of your show, because it's a sidebar presented by Law and Crime with the host of Jesse Weber, but given at the top of the show that we didn't announce that Sean Combs walked out of this courthouse, I think it was kind of a little bit of a spoiler for the viewers here that the judge decided to keep him behind bars until his sentencing hearing. So I did see kind of a little bit of disappointment from both Sean Combs and his family after the judge made his decision. So the judge said that the jury convicted the defendant on count 3 and 5, that being the Mann Act. He says bail is denied because the government correctly noted that detention is mandatory and it's not appropriate for Sean Combs to be released on bail given the charges that he's still been convicted of. And so the judge says that they disagree with the defense's argument, saying that any felony under 117, and Jesse, you probably know that more than me, requires detention. And he said even if the defendant is required to not be likely to present a danger to the community, the judge even kind of pointing out just some of what we had heard during the trial, where the defense conceded that the defendant, Sean Combs, was violent. The judge said, "We own the domestic violence." That was a word that he took from the transcript because Mark Agnifilo had said that in open court. He told the jurors that, and he told them that multiple times, and the judge pointed it out multiple times from the transcript. He says that the defendant's concession as to domestic violence wasn't necessary. He pointed out Mark Agnifilo's closing, where he says it's horrible for Miss Ventura, what she had gone through, and that domestic violence is the issue, kind of even pointing to her Instagram statement that she had made after the 2016 video was released on CNN. And again, the judge was saying that the video is very much domestic violence, even kind of pointing to the London hotel incident, saying where Mark Agnifilo had pointed out that obviously something happened, that he was violent at times, and that conceding the defendant's violence, that he even poses no danger, that he was pointing to violence happened after the HSI raids in March of 2024, because they kind of pointed to what had happened to Jane just a couple months after, and pointing back to the June 2024 incident, which was just a little more than a year ago to this day. And so for those reasons, and just some more reasons too, the judge decided that the defendant will remain behind bars pending his sentencing.
And yeah, I looked at the government's letter, and they talked about violence, they talked about drug use, they talked about the abuse of Cassie, that you have multiple victims in this case, that he used the staff to carry out these transportation to engage in prostitution crimes, that he tried to obstruct justice with respect to these crimes, that under the Bail Reformed Act, they argued this was a crime of violence, that he poses a serious risk of flight, a danger to the community. So clearly it seems that the judge was persuaded by that. The judge did mention something really, really interesting, because somebody would listen.
Social media and live streaming are booming. A few were having a party. A few were taken aback. However, nobody was quiet, because Diddy wasn't the only person involved. It has to do with everything he stood for. The idea that some people are above the law, the misuse of celebrity and unbridled power. That myth was dispelled. The music industry started to tremble when it was announced that Diddy was now officially in jail. Not next week or following an appeal. Canceled brand deals. He is being covertly kicked off playlists, collaborators, distributors, and streaming platforms, and his royalties are being frozen. There was no one who wanted to be within the blast radius, and the growing panic was palpable. Other well-known people started to get lawyers. Previously mentioned in whispers, Names were now being spoken out. They were drafting subpoenas. Reporters were going further. It was no longer a one-man show. A floodgate was opened. Diddy was not planning back in that jail. He wasn't tweeting. He has no plans to make his next record. He was pacing, confined, and only able to hear the clang of steel and concrete. Another prisoner, just waiting for the hammer to drop. And since this isn't finished, it's coming. Not even close. Federal documents would suppress names and secret layers. Ongoing investigations and sealed indictments are all present. The climax was not the guilty judgment. The spark was a cause. His attorneys are aware of it. They battled so hard for bail because of this. They had no desire to keep him secure. Even if it was only for a week, they wanted him free. A few more calls, a few more backroom transactions, a few more days to relocate assets. The court, however, did not flinch. Because comfort isn't the goal of justice. Convenience is not the issue. It has to do with responsibility. Diddy is dealing with it head-on for the first time. Just walls, no smoke, no mirrors, no spin.